Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. A little later in the show, Kenny Roda will join us. We'll talk Donovan Mitchell's extension, some Cavs talk, as well as some Guardians talk. We begin with the Browns, though, and Jack Conklin on his Instagram. Nothing is easy after an injury, especially multiple injuries. I could never have made it through without my wife, Caitlin Conklin. She's my rock. I talked to Nick Chubb. There may be one dark night, but the first person to rise from the pit was Bane. Hashtag I'm back. Jack Conklin on social media. Apparently telling us he is good to go for training camp. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon. Now with the Orange and Brown Report. Congratulations. Also co-host of the All Eyez on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. Busy guy, Case. Jack Conklin, good news.
Yeah, I didn't see it coming. This tweet caught me off guard. We were kind of kicking it around earlier in the day on the Barking Browns and, just what the plans are going to be for him when he returns, because you have to consider this isn't just, the torn ACL. The year before was a torn patella tendon. Like, this is back-to-back devastating injuries. And it almost feels like Jack Conklin's older than he is. He's only 29 years old. These injuries start to pile up. You start to wonder what the future, the longevity of a player will be. But for him to be back this soon was surprising to me. I know it was the first game last year, so we're a full calendar year almost, So from an ACL, that kind of time's up. But this question remains, how are the Browns going to handle him? Are they going to slow roll it? Or are they going to immediately, just thrust him back out there as the starter? It's fascinating. It's one thing I don't know. But I do know this. I was kind of thrilled to see the Batman and Bane reference. Bane's a personal favorite of mine. I got him on the shelf behind me.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is, you're right. I kind of had the same mindset. He's been around in the NFL and at a high level for so long. You immediately think, he's in his 30s, 32, 30. He's 29. So Browns figure he still has some good football left inside him. So let's see how that plays out. This is kind of interesting. Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. 2024 NFL secondary rankings. Jets 1, 49ers 2, Bills 3, Ravens 4, Dolphins 5, and they have the Browns down at 6, which I think is way too low. Browns defense played lights out in 2023 as relentless pressure it put on quarterbacks helped the secondary that faced multiple injuries at the safety position. Denzel Ward also battled injuries the past 2 years, but has transformed the unit into one of the NFL's best when he's on the field. Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson also make life difficult for opposing offenses. I think their secondary is underrated. And again, I think their line's really good, but I think those three cornerbacks are as good in man-to-man coverage as there are as a unit.
No doubt. And that's just where we're at, to where they could say you're the sixth best secondary, and it still feels disrespectful, because I see a top 2-3 unit in the league just based on talent alone. But I think they touched on it in the article. It comes down to health, and they said Denzel's been battling injuries for 2 seasons. It's been longer than that. He misses time every year. But if you think about it, 3 legitimate cover corners, and then you add in Grant Delpit on the back end, and if you get a healthy Juan Thornhill, and now add McLeod as the rotational safety, if they catch a break and finally get healthy, this is the best secondary in the NFL.
Yeah, and to your point, they had 2 undrafted rookie free agents who played and didn't miss a beat.
No, and that was a welcome sight. But now that you know that, you feel like just the depth of the secondary, it's kind of absurd when you think about it. But I think Delpit could be a true difference maker, someone that if he can put together a full season, is a guy who's going to be up for Pro Bowls and All Pros. I think he's that level of talent. And we already know this cornerback room is the best in the league.
And I'm anxious to see Juan Thornhill healthy. He was not healthy pretty much all last year. A calf injury is something. If you try to run on a calf injury, that's not a good idea. All right. I don't know how to feel about this one. So this is time of possession percentage last season. Dove Kleiman tweets this out. Browns were tops, 54%. Bills, Bears, Cowboys, 53%. Saints, Lions, Panthers, Ravens, 42%. Tied for 10th is Jaguars, Chiefs, Bengals, Rams, and Eagles. All right. Does it mean that the offense had to fight for every single blade of grass they had, so they had time and they weren't explosive enough? Or is it, you keep the ball away from the other offense, and unless you throw a pick six, they can't score? I don't know how. I don't think the offense got enough easy yards. Well, let me say that.
Yeah. I think if you interviewed 32 NFL head coaches and said, would you rather win the time of possession or lose it? All 32 they want to win that. Yep. You want to control the controllables, because if you have the ball, the other team doesn't. And, if you just look at that as a stat, time of possession, you marry that with turnovers, you get a good indication of who's going to win the game. Except the Browns had the highest time of possession and the most turnovers. It just goes to show you what a wild 2023 it was for the Cleveland Browns. It is a crazy stat. But more often than not, you want to win that. Boring or not explosive, however you want to put it. If you can have the ball more than the opponent, you're going to win most of your games.
Yeah, unless you turn the ball over more than your opponent. So that's the only caveat with that. So.
Yeah, you can't make it up. They led in both categories. So it's pretty wild 2023.
All right, this is from Dogs by Nature. 5 Browns that could be in for performance regressions in 2024. Number 1, they say Zadarius Smith, signed to a new deal, soon to be 32-year-old, fighting age, less financial motivation to perform well as he did last year. I don't know about the rationale there. Number 2, David Njoku. While it's possible that his growth will continue, Cleveland added Jerry Jeudy, will likely use Jerome Ford and Naheem Hines in the passing game. Nick Chubb's return could also mean less targets for Njoku. Number 3, Shelby Harris. Harris might step in as a starter, but Siaka Ika and Michael Hall Jr. Being added the last 2 drafts could reduce his snap count as well. Turning 33 before the season starts, will also have to fight off age decline. Number 4, Amari Cooper. Addition of Jeudy, hopeful development of Cedric Tillman in his second season could lessen Cooper's target share. 1,000-yard season still likely, but 1,250 might be tough to match. And number 5, Dustin Hopkins, despite missing multiple games, had the second most field goal attempts of his career behind 2016 and the highest percentage of makes. It dipped back to the 80% range. Seems likely to a guy that turns 33 on October 1st. The Zadarius Smith, people always overplay the contract year thing, I think. Zadarius Smith is still playing next to Myles Garrett. I think that's going to help his production.
Yeah, and I can see a world in which his pressures go down, but his sacks go up, because he had an extremely high pressure total and not a high sack rate. Wasn't converting a lot of those into sacks. A lot of that's luck of the draw. A lot of that's another player getting there first, a guy rolling out to the other side. I see that number. I see Zadarius as getting close to that double-digit number again in sacks. 9 to 11, I think, is probably where he lands. And he might end up with only 60 pressures, which is still an absurd number. So I don't see regression in his future for this season. But when I look at that list, Dustin Hopkins, I could see that. I mean, he was insanely good last year. He was insanely good over 50 yards, which has not been his career. His career is usually up 250. He's excellent and struggles in that. So a regression back to the means to be back in the mid to high 80s. Percentage-wise, I think that's probably more than likely. Njoku, I can't see, though. I can't see, like we talked about in the last segment, this team didn't get enough easy yards. Well, who's the easiest guy to get easy yards with? It's David Njoku. And we've seen what happened when the running game faltered over the back half of the season. He was an extension of that just by getting the ball in his hands. Now, his average depth of target wasn't high, but his yards after the catch were great, So I seen they had to see the light with what's possible with him, and I can't see him getting any less than 8 targets a game. That would be malpractice in my eyes. The Amari Cooper one, though, I think you could see. I mean, 17.4 yards per catch, 1,250 yards. He could have an excellent season and still fall below those numbers.
Yeah, the one thing I would think is I think, when we hear what people expect from the offense with Ken Dorsey and kind of moving it out, you're going to see motion. Motion is enabled. You want to find an advantage. So Cooper, that's one of the guys you're going to look to. And Njoku is a mismatch. They're going to try to find a way. All right, do you want to put a linebacker on him? Great, he's going to run a seam route. Do you want to put a safety on him? Great, he's going to turn around, catch the ball, and drag him 8 yards. So those two, I think, are going to be close to what they are. just because they're going to look to get the ball in their hands.
Yeah. You lean on your playmakers. And we saw what Njoku was over the back half of the season. I can't see them going away from that. If anything, you lean into that.
So this one is from Fox Sports. 5 players facing the most pressure in 2024. Number 1 on the list, Deshaun Watson, quarterback from Cleveland. We've talked about that a lot. They also have Brian Burns, edge rusher from the Giants. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver from the Texans. Bryce Young, quarterback from the Panthers. Devin White, linebacker from the Eagles. Relative to Watson, his dismal performance in production, 59.8% completion rate, 14 to 9 touchdown to interception ratio, 81.7% passer rating, 181 yards per game throughout the term, led to concerns about his ability to compete at an elite level. Pressure is on Watson to regain Pro Bowl form to validate hefty deal the Browns handed him a few seasons ago. Casey, we've said it all along. It's a big season for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
I don't think his performance has been dismal. He was injured last year, and he couldn't string together 4 consecutive games. So there were games where he looked good. There were games where he did not look good.
Yeah, and those numbers they're including are also from the 2022 season when he was coming off a 700-day hiatus. So it's hard for me to put stock in the 2022 games. So I'm going to evaluate off what I saw last year. And what I saw last year, there were some inconsistencies, but there's only in my mind one bad game, and that was the Monday night game in Pittsburgh. True, that was a bad game. You can't win like with it playing that style of football. But when I look at the other games, I saw a player that I saw make steps, that I saw making reads, who I saw in the fourth quarters of games be a very good quarterback, which is what this team needs him to be. But it comes down to those short windows. We're talking about small sample sizes of games. He has to play the breadth of a season before they even know exactly what he is at this stage in his career. And I agree, there is a ton of pressure on him. He just can't play like there is. He just has to play his game and facilitate, be a point guard. He has plenty of playmakers around him to lean on. And, if you go out there with all that pressure and you try to win on every play and just try to win against that pressure and prove that you're this thing, you can't do that. Just play your game. And if you do that over the course of the season, I think the chips are going to fall where they're going to fall, and they'll be looked at as a different light going into next season.
Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon, co-host of the All Eyez on Cleveland podcast, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, this is TJ from Tampa, Florida calling you. First-time caller, love the show. I hear a lot of talk on the show about if Deshaun Watson stays healthy for 12, 13, 14 games, we should make it deep into the playoffs, and I think most of us would agree with that. I also think a lot of us are not holding our breath for that to happen. Whether Deshaun's shoulder doesn't hold up or another injury happens or maybe the inconsistent play happens. My question is, how much do the expectations really change for this team if, say, Jameis Winston had to jump in there in week 6 or 7 and ride the rest of the season out and take this team into the playoffs? Do they really change? When you look back at last year with DTR, Walker, Flacco, the team really did well. I think it's an upgrade with Jameis, and he seems to be a likable guy, and the players seem to like him. I don't know if the expectations change all that much. Curious about your thoughts. Go Browns. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, this leads right into the article that you wrote for the Orange and Brown Report. Take us through that and just the how you arrived at it and your thoughts.
Well, I can tell you how it started, Dave. It started at this show a week ago when we were getting told that the Browns had the 31st best quarterback situation in the league. And I said on the show, I would take Jameis Winston over several of these starters that are on this list ahead of the Browns here. And then you start to pull it apart and look at it, and just for what it is. First off, the decision to sign Winston is a dramatic philosophical shift from where this team was at just 1 year ago when they were content going into the season with a fifth round rookie as the primary backup. So they're hedging their bets. They needed a higher ceiling guy with more experience. But then you look at the player itself. You got a guy who can win from within the pocket, big, tall, strong, with a proclivity to push the ball vertically. Well, we already know Kevin Stefanski is comfortable building a game plan around a player with that exact skill set. You look at what Dorsey's worked with, big quarterbacks with strong arms. And I'm not saying he's on the level of athlete of a Josh Allen or a Cam Newton, but Winston is an above average athlete who can give you more than people will give him credit for. And then you start to look at the cast around him, what's possible. I agree with the caller. If the Browns were to have to turn to Winston for a long duration, my expectations would not change. I would take him over Russell Wilson. I would take him over several quarterbacks that are on our schedule, Daniel Jones or Derek Carr or Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. I don't think the drop offs is as far as people want to believe it is. The thing with Winston is the thing that's always been with Winston. The same thing that makes him good is the same thing that gets him in trouble. It's his confidence. Jameis Winston has never seen a throw he can't make or a window he can't fit a ball into. So Dorsey and Stefanski have to get him to toe that line between being confident and being reckless. But I think if you can do that, the ceiling is just as high with Jameis Winston as it is with Deshaun Watson.
Yes, and I think he's a better fit for what I expect this offense to be than Joe Flacco would have been, which is why they signed him. I mean, the off the field that does factor into it with the fans calling for Flacco, and that factors into it. But remember, this guy was the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft when he came out, and he has thrown for 30 touchdowns and 5,000 yards in a season. Now he's thrown 30 interceptions in a season too, but he has the ability to make every throw.
Well, he's never not produced. Any season that he started more than 13 games, he's thrown for over 4,000 yards. Like that, he produces. He pushes the ball vertically, and to your point, this young man is no stranger to high leverage situations. Since the age of 17 at the Elite 11 quarterback, he's been on the national radar, was the top dual threat in the nation coming into college. Obviously, we know as a redshirt freshman, wins a national championship, goes on to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Now his production wasn't enough to keep him in Tampa as the starter. And then he goes to the Saints, kind of gets in that backup role, gets the opportunity to start, goes 5-2, and then tears his ACL. And then after that falls out of favor with a new head coach. So getting a clean slate here, he has all the skills, all the abilities. You'll never find a teammate to speak bad about him. He's a guy that uplifts everything. And even if he doesn't play it down, he makes the team better just based on the type of person that you brought into that quarterback room.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like it, and I think to the caller's point, expectations should still be as high if he has to start games. This is concerning. Highest rate of incompletion due to inaccurate passes in 2023. This is from Warren Sharp. Highest is Deshaun Watson, 43.9. Tyrod Taylor, Trevor Siemian, Bryce Young. Those are guys you do not want to be around in this conversation. Lamar Jackson at 36.7. So here's the question. The question is it because the quarterback's mechanics are a mess, which they were some, or is your offense not playing to the quarterback's strengths? Are you asking him to do things that he doesn't do well? And I think there was a little bit of that.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. His eyes and his feet were married perfectly. He was getting antsy, trying to hit bigger plays, passing over some easy stuff. And then you saw in the games where he got hurt and he was playing free because he wasn't in his own head and he was just facilitating. He was getting rid of the Tennessee game and the Baltimore game. He was very good in the second half of those games while injured because he wasn't overthinking it. But then you add in the fact that I don't think it was a perfect match for the offense to his skill set. And if there's anybody you have to tailor your system around, it is your signal caller. It is the guy who touches the ball every single play. And I think you're seeing a full-throated effort this year to do that. You've seen a complete offensive staff overhaul, bringing pieces in, and building this offense around Deshaun Watson. Now, if 2024 comes and goes and you don't see any progression and you still see the same issues that you see from time to time with his indecision, passing over easy stuff to hold on the ball, looking for big plays, and then they don't materialize and you take a loss, you can't win like that. So it's got to be a mixture of keeping on schedule, but letting him be him. And then obviously a lot of that is being in the shotgun, letting him dictate, letting him call progressions, letting him get comfortable with the scheme and the way that he's used to seeing things, and let him go out there and just make the play that's to be made. If he does that, I don't think you're seeing 43.9 as far as his inaccuracies, and it is a very startling number. You want that number to be in the low 30s at worst. For winning teams, when you're looking up and down that list, there weren't too many quarterbacks that made themselves to the playoffs with that kind of inaccurate play.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes was 23.6 or something like that. That'll give you an idea of how his was. All right, before we go to break, most overrated statistic from every NFL team 2023 season. This is from Athlon Sports, and this one's bizarre again. David Njoku, 81 catches, 882 yards. Njoku broke out this season in part because the Browns increased his targets. Njoku's catch percentage dropped from 72.5 to 65.9, and his 11 drops were third most in the NFL. Browns acquired Jerry Jeudy this offseason and will likely try to spread the ball around a bit more in 2024. I'm not sure why they say that's a misleading stat. 81 catches for 882 yards is you're closing in on 1,000.
Which is exactly where he should be.
Yep.
So to call that an overrated stat, that is crazy to me. He was the lifeblood of this offense the second half of the season, and it should have been like that from the beginning of the season. We're talking about a player going into his 8th year in the league, just 28 years old, just coming into his physical prime. That's not going to go down. That's something you should expect. I said earlier, I think you should at least target this young man 8 times a game because good things happen when the ball's in his hands. And I still believe there are levels to his game to unlock. I think in the red zone, he could be a bigger threat than they've let him be. So I just think that there's several more pieces that are going to go into this, but in no way do I think that is an overrated stat. That is who David Njoku is, and I expect that only to go up.
Yeah, you're at the level. That's the basement. Now you need to get. It's only going up from there. I'm with you. Case Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, co-host of the All Eyez on Cleveland podcast. And now I can step aside. Take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon, co-host of the Barking Browns podcast. One rookie that could impact each NFL team the most in 2024 from Pro Football Network. For the Browns, they say Michael Hall Jr., though the Browns have a host of veterans at defensive tackle. Among them, new additions Quentin Jefferson, Shelby Harris. Hall set himself apart with his rare athleticism and flexibility. Alongside Dalvin Tomlinson, he can eat. Yeah, Hall, I think, will have a role. I think Nathaniel Watson, Bookie Watson, could end up being the main guy.
Yeah, his path is easier, right? He has a wider path to playing time, more of a role that could be carved out for him to see him get more snaps. It's going to be hard for Hall to see a great number of snaps unless there's several injuries in front of him, just based on the fact that, and not for nothing, he's a young rookie, and to come into the league as a defensive tackle, that is a steep learning curve. We've seen many players who are good players come in and it takes them a year or two to truly find their way. Now, I trust they'll play him on selective snaps to let him just do what he does. Let him go eat, let him rush the passer. And I think that's so third and longs, second and longs, you might see him get rotated in those situations, try to keep him off the field and first downs when you can. But I agree with you. I think that if you look at all the rookies, I think Nathaniel Watson has the clearest path to making an impact as a rookie.
All right, so this one also by Dogs by Nature. These are 5 Browns that could see a jump in production in 2024. Number 1, they go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, chance to build on his performance in 2024. Biggest way he could do that, a few more explosive plays. Number 2, Alex Wright, 2023, 5 sacks, but was only on the field for 38% of the defensive snaps. That's impressive. Elijah Moore, last year, a career year for Moore, 59 catches, 640 yards. This year, with Cleveland expected to have only 1 tight end on the field much of the year, could see another jump in numbers. Number 4, Juan Thornhill, never seemed to get comfortable in his new surroundings as injuries limited him to only 11 games. A lot of that was a calf injury. Hard to play safety with a bad calf. And number 5, Cedric Tillman. Progression from Tillman starts with route running and learning the nuances of the game despite the addition of Judy. Brown should throw the ball enough that Tillman sees more than his 21 receptions. Of all those, JOK jumps out just because, the first part of the season, he was kind of figuring it out. Man, he figured it out.
How scary is that for opposing offenses? That JOK could make yet another leap in production. Talking about a guy who had 20 tackles for loss. When you look at that metric, when you look at the league leaders, it's JOK and a bunch of edge rushers. As an off-ball linebacker, he's making that kind of impact behind the line of scrimmage. But I do agree with something in that article is the one thing that we could see an uptick of from JOK are the turnovers. Mm-hmm. He is such a plus-level athlete. If you were to tell me at the end of 2024, JOK picked off 4 passes and took 2 back touchdowns, that would sound about right for me for the caliber of athlete that he is, and that could be the other level of his game that he could unlock. Also, when you look at that list, I think like Elijah Moore, I don't know if he'll have more catches. I think he's probably going to be more efficient, if anything. I think his role will change. I think his average depth of target will change. His average yards per catch will change. But I think the amount of looks he's going to get are going to come down because of the addition of Judy, because of the emergence of David Njoku as a focal point of this offense. Obviously, you have Amari Cooper. You got the stuff you're going to want to do with the backs with Nyheim Hines, Jerome Ford. So I don't think that Moore will see an uptick in as far as overall production. I just think the efficiency should be up this season.
Yeah, and relative to Wright, I think Wright, I didn't, you look at that. The 5 sacks in just 38% of the snaps. And you know what? He's probably earned more playing time because he was good.
Yeah, and he's not a primary pass rusher. He's an edge setter, 6'7", 265 pounds. He's there to be the muscle, but the fact that you saw him over the back half of the season get sacks in 5 straight games, I mean, you saw it with your own eyes, him starting to come on and only playing 38% of the snaps. I don't know how much of an uptick you see in that just because of the numbers game, because you have, Ogbo and Karanquo, because you have Za'Darius, and maybe Isaiah McGuire starts to get some more reps. But I do think that the long-term plan is for Alex Wright to be the guy who surpasses Za'Darius when Za'Darius' contract is up. I think they're grooming him for that role. So, if he gets close to 500 snaps this season, maybe he gets close to 8 sacks. But I think it's what he does in the run game that impresses me the most.
And the last one we'll talk about, Juan Thornhill, again, I just want to see the guy healthy. I think, he got beat up a little bit by the fan base, and he just was never felt quite right.
Yeah, we never got to see him at full strength. And when you think about what his role will be in this team that plays a ton of cover one man, is he's that roaming free safety, hash to hash. And to have that kind of range, to have a calf injury, that is severely limiting. He has to be able to turn on a dime and beeline it for a point, in that back end. And when you're struggling with the calf injury, it's hard to be yourself. We never really got to see him fully healthy. We saw what he meant as a leader. What he brings with the experience. And if you see him fully healthy, it could just unlock another level to the secondary, which is already a top-tier secondary, in my opinion.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, we'll continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K-12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, also the co-host of the All Eyez on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. One free agent signing every NFL team should make ahead of training camp. This from Pro Football Network. For the Browns, they say a wide receiver Lynn Bowden. Jerry Jeudy and Mari Cooper look more like inside possession targets for Deshaun Watson. The Youngstown native can provide a non-expensive, versatile deep threat for Cleveland. Bowden's a pretty good return person, too. Went to Kentucky, went to Warren Harding High School. He's a great athlete. I can't imagine bringing in another wide receiver. That's already loaded with guys they like and want to keep.
Yeah, you already kind of choked down with young receiving talent. You kind of need one of those guys to identify themselves. By bringing someone else in to fulfill a role like that would kind of just bog that down, and you wouldn't get to find out which one of these guys is going to be the next dude for you. So bring Lynn Bowden in. Great athlete. Obviously he was a college quarterback, Kentucky for a while, very explosive. He's kind of bounced around a few teams. If you were to bring him in my estimation, it would be more of a practice squad candidate.
Yeah. And again, you already have Hines and a bunch of guys that can return kicks. I mean, you put the ball in his hands, good things usually happen, but I don't necessarily see the fit there. This is from Sports Illustrated. Every team's most underrated player heading into 2024. They say the Browns' Maurice Hurst played fewer than 400 total snaps last year between defense and special teams. The season was truncated by a pectoral injury. When he was on the field, he was picking off a pass against the Seahawks, weaving deep into the Titans' backfield to wrap up Derrick Henry. He is good stylistic complement to the rest of the Browns' defensive line and can slot in as a down-specific player, still play stout enough to plug the A-gap on third and short. I like him. I think he is vitally important. There are a lot. That is probably the single most upgraded unit the last 2 years, defensive tackle.
Thank God we were calling for it, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
and they did. They finally did it. And you see the production they're getting, the push they get, the style of player they're after. And Maurice Hurst fits that. He's when healthy, when that's the caveat too, he's had trouble staying healthy. So that's why you see them draft a Michael Hall, why they sign a Quentin Jefferson. They're just tripling down on that, the pass rushing defensive tackle that they can rotate. And Hurst, when healthy, was as active as anyone in the league getting pressures. It didn't convert into a ton of sacks, but he was constantly shooting gaps, getting in the backfield, redirecting ball carriers, and just fulfilling his role. The key for him is being able to stay healthy over the course of a season, because if he does that, I truly think he could cash in with a decent-sized contract somewhere.
Yeah, I think if he can stay on the field, the production's going to be there. This was from Dogs by Nature. 4 free agent edge rushers the Browns could sign. Number 1, Yannick Ngakoue. While he'll never be a quality run stopper, rotating Ngakoue on big third downs could be fun terror for Jim Schwartz. Number 2, Jerry Hughes, 35-year-old, played limited snaps last year. 3 sacks, 4 TFLs, 3 quarterback hits. Smart player, may fit situationally and help in case of injury. Number 3, Shaq Lawson, never a huge accumulator of stats. Playing time has dropped the last 4 seasons. Still a rosterable player, solid experience at 30 years old. And Rasheem Green, youngest player on the list, might fit a little better to replace Lonnie Phelps, who was going into his second season. Green had 6.5 sacks, 18 quarterback hits in 2021. Perhaps Schwartz could unlock that player once again. Casey, I don't see him bringing in an edge rusher. They've got 4 or 5 that they like, and you mentioned I think when you saw Isaiah McGuire, he was pretty good.
Yeah, well, unless there's a catastrophic injury early in camp, I don't see them kicking the tires on any of these players. If I were to pick one of those players that I'd be interested in, probably Ngakoue. But the reality of the situation is this defensive end room is just stacked. I mean, there's just not room. It's you can't even get Isaiah McGuire on the field to see what you have in him because of the talent you have in front of him, which is a great problem to have. Mm-hmm. I just don't think you're going to add anyone else to that room. And then when you add in the fact you got a player like Quentin Jefferson who can also rush off the edge. So you kind of and you some of your defensive ends can kick inside. So it's going to be hard to bring anyone in the defensive line, period, but especially the edge room.
Yeah, and they may kick Michael Hall Jr. out there on pass rush situations because he's fast. Before I let you go, who is somebody you think could have a breakout season? Just when you look at the Browns and you think, I have a guy in mind. I'm curious as to who you think could take it up a level or two.
For me, it's Cedric Tillman. I think we're, it's all about development, and we know physically he has all the tools in the bag to be successful at the next level. It's about between the years putting it together and seeing if you can get a chemistry with the quarterback. Because if you can, he has too many tools, and he's one guy who's different than everyone else in the room. From his physicality, from his size. So you need a red zone threat. I think he could fulfill that. I think he could be a boundary guy down the sideline. Someone I would like to see get used in the screen game because how hard he is to bring down. So for him, it's all about making the steps mentally. Physically, I think he is a prototypical X receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking of. And so the thing I think, he blocks well. So you can play him in the red zone and not say, "Hey, this guy's in. We're gonna pass the ball." And you know and I've said this a couple of times. The guy that he kind of puts me in mind of not catching, not receiving, but as a blocker is Cooper Kupp. They will use Cooper Kupp to come in and block linemen, and he has that type of he has shown already that he can do that.
Well, he'll put you in your ear hole if you don't have your head on a swivel. He's very physical out there in the run game, and he should be a threat in the red zone. And when I think of what the progression for someone like Cedric Tillman should be, I kind of go back to what Donovan Peoples-Jones was in year 2. I need to see one of those kind of leaps out of him, although I believe he's a better athlete and can get better separation. But as far as the production, I want to see something along those lines to feel like he's progressing properly.
Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Writing for the Orange and Brown Report, he is also the co-host, All Eyez on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Kenny Roda from WHBC. We're talking Cavs, then Guardians on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers and some big news for the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell has agreed to a 3-year extension worth $150.3 million. That is the max. It's only a 3-year deal with a player option for the 3rd year in 2027, 2028. Could have been a 4-year deal, but a 3-year deal, player option, in essence, a 2-year deal. Donovan Mitchell, his message after signing the extension.
All year I've been saying the same shit. Like, saying how much I like it. And every day it's like, oh, he gonna do this, he gonna do that. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I think it's hilarious. It is what it is. I'm glad I got this shit done, man. Glad I got this shit done, Cleveland. Whew. Now we can focus, you know what I'm saying? Let's get to it.
With that, let's welcome in Kenny Roda from the Kenny and JT Show, News Talk 1480 WHBC. Kenny, could have been a 4-year deal. In essence, it's a 2-year deal, but it's a business decision for Donovan as well, because after the 2 years, he can sign even a more lucrative deal that gets into crazy, crazy money. But they keep their best player in Cleveland, and now they have 2 years to improve the roster around him.
I love the move. I thought it was going to happen from everything that I heard. We were a little bit skeptical yesterday. Why didn't they just announce Mitchell and Kenny Atkinson on the same day yesterday? Well, it was Kenny Atkinson's day, right? His second ever head coaching job in the NBA. It was his day. He answered great questions yesterday. Kudos to our media members throwing questions out at him as to why this is the right time for him to become a head coach again, and about this team and how he's going to, mesh this unit together. And now that we know that Donovan Mitchell is indeed coming back, that becomes the next question, right? Forget the amount of years. I don't care. We don't have to worry about Donovan Mitchell now for a couple of years, right? That's over and done with. Yeah, it would have been nice to get him for another year to control that. But in the NBA, players can be traded after a half a year. So that doesn't concern me. What does concern me is, how does Kenny Atkinson keep Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, as well as Jared Allen, all on the same team? He called them 4 All-Stars yesterday. Keep them all happy and make that offense work. And will it work? If not, they've got to make that assessment here now with everybody in the fold as to, okay, Donovan's back. We're not trading him. We're not trading Mobley. So what do we do with Garland and Allen if we don't think it can work? So while the first domino to fall was firing J.B. Bickerstaff, the second domino was hiring Kenny Atkinson. The third is Donovan Mitchell's extension. The fourth domino now will have to fall in what they do, whether they keep everybody together or start trying to make some moves. So
Atkinson, to me, sounded like a basketball coach instead of an analytics life guru. Did you get the same vibe? I mean, he answered kind of basketball questions and didn't give you canned answers.
How nice is that? A coach in Cleveland that actually will give us some answers to questions that we ask that make sense and aren't those, canned answers like in Bull Durham, learn your cliches, right? So, yeah, it was refreshing to hear that yesterday. And I heard Steve Kerr give him a glowing report. Draymond Green, whether you like him, you hate him, doesn't matter. Kind words about him. He spent time with Ty Lue, who we all know in Cleveland. So as he called it, it was a, kind of like LeBron, really, right? When LeBron left here, we didn't like how he left, but he said he thought he had to go to a team with a culture like the Heat, with Pat Riley, with Eric Spoelstra, and he learned what it took to be a champion, and he brought that back to Cleveland. Well, let's hope that Kenny Atkinson has learned, right, from his first time as a head coach with the Nets to coaching with Ty Lue in LA and winning a championship with Steve Kerr in Golden State, spending the last 3 years there. Let's hope that he's bringing back that basketball 101 championship class, and he's able to teach it to everybody in the Cavs organization.
Now, I do know that, they have to say that they think they can make all the core 4 work together and play. The minute you say you don't think they fit, your trade value drops off the table immediately. But Atkinson, he seemed to have an idea of how he wanted that to go. To me, just your thoughts on how those 4 guys mesh, and do you think something's coming?
I don't think Mitchell and Garland will win you a championship in the same backcourt. Too small, can exploit them on defense. They don't seem to work well together, right? Most of the focus yesterday was on who? It was on Evan Mobley, turning him into an all-star, getting him more touches, finding the way to get him more involved in the offense, up the tempo of the offense, maybe with him running the floor and whatnot. So for me, it was interesting that he focused on Mobley, not a lot on Garland, which leads me to believe that maybe Rich Paul and company from Clutch Sports, right? We heard that after the season ended, that if Donovan signs, allegedly, they're going to ask for a trade for Darius Garland. Well, what's the market out there for Darius Garland? I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you. I would hope there's a good one, because I don't think you can keep this backcourt together and win with a tiny backcourt. And you say, wait, 6'3", 6'1" isn't tiny. Well, yeah, it is. In today's NBA, right? That's a small backcourt, and we saw what the Boston Celtics did to the Dallas Mavericks in the finals, exploiting Kyrie as well as Luka Doncic. So for me, I would trade Darius Garland if I'm Kobe Altman, but everything Kobe said to this point, he's been consistent, and that is, I don't feel the need to break it up, so we're going to try and run it back with a new coach. We'll see if he holds true to that.
So along those lines, we all heard Darius Garland's camp, Rich Paul, Clutch Sports, would be requesting a trade if Mitchell signed the long-term contract. Now there's some reports that Darius Garland really doesn't want to go, but Rich Paul and his management think long-term it's better for him to go. ESPN's Brian Windhorst on the topic of Garland's trade value. This from ESPN Cleveland.
I don't think the market is there for Darius Garland. And I think Kobe Altman knows this, and he knew this even before before DeJounte Murray got traded. And so I think it's a terrible time to trade Darius Garland. And so even if Darius Garland does ask for a trade, and I'll say it again, I'm not convinced that he will, nor am I convinced that he personally wants to. I could change. I could next time we talk have a different set of information. I don't think the Cavs are going to trade him because I don't think it's a good time to trade.
And Kenny, I guess when you look at it, you don't want to give away the former 5th overall pick for way less.
We don't want another Kyrie situation, right, David?
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to just give him away for nothing because that set the organization back. They had a chance to win a championship. I would have kept Kyrie, said, hey, go have your knee surgery. You're staying. We're not giving you up. He probably would have come back in time to play for the playoffs. Maybe they win another title, but instead, what do? They panic, they get rid of him, and they get nothing in return. They can't do the same thing for Garland. I don't want to trade him just to trade him. And if the market's not there, then guess what? Kenny Atkinson said this yesterday. That's why they're paying me, right? The big bucks to figure out a way to make this thing work. So if Garland stays, if Allen stays, they run it back with the core 4, then it's up to Atkinson to figure this thing out.
Yep. And you know what? Points to him. He said that's what they're paying him to do. So he realizes the offense has to be better than it was without question. All right, before we go to break, every NBA team's top off-season target, this is from the Bleacher Report. For the Cavaliers, they say Dorian Finney-Smith. Cleveland's level of interest may depend on Isaac Okoro's foray into restricted free agent. Okoro is better suited to defend smaller perimeter players. Finney-Smith remains best deployed against larger covers. I got to be honest, Kenny, Dorian Finney-Smith, all right. I'm okay with him. It doesn't excite me.
I'm not doing somersaults and cartwheels either about Dorian Finney-Smith, right? When I saw that name, and that's the best name that popped up with the Cavs, that did not excite me at all. Is there a possibility of making a trade, a 3-team trade? That's something that good general managers are able to do. Who those targets are, I don't know. I believe Miles Bridges is a free agent. Now, he comes with baggage off the court, right, with the domestic situation, domestic violence situation. So, do you want to add that to your culture? But he kind of fits what you need. And if he's a free agent and he can't ask for the mood because of that, maybe that's a direction that you go in. But Dorian Finney-Smith, if that's all they add along with Kenny Atkinson, forget about a championship this coming season. And I don't even know if they get to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs if that's all they do.
Yeah, the Eastern Conference, the Knicks have improved, the Sixers have improved dramatically, and you still have the Celtics. I'm with you. Kenny Roda and I are going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we're going to turn our attention to the Guardians. One of the best records in all of baseball. Kenny Roda and I talking Guardians when we return on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking with Kenny Roda from Kenny and JT Show News Talk, 1480 WHBC. We're turning our attention to the Guardians. Guardians start a 3-game series with the White Sox tonight. They're first place in the AL Central, one of the best records in all of baseball, 6 games ahead of the Twins. Now, one of the big reasons that's kind of gone overlooked, take a look at this pretty chart. The Guardians are right in the middle, at top third in home runs hit. They're 10th out of 30 big league teams with 95. I bring that up. Last year, they were dead last in baseball with 124 for the entire season. Already at 95 as we sit. Kenny, that's, I'm trying to find ways to explain how they're in first place with the record there. That's one of them. They're finding ways to win. There's something to be said for that.
Can you hear my dog, Frankie, barking in the background? He's excited about the first place Guardians. They're 52-30. Like you said, top 10 in home runs. They're in the top third of the league after finishing dead last. Now, a lot of that has to do with Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor, right? 43 of those 95 bombs have come from those two, but still other guys have contributed. Stephen Kwan with a career high. Naylor already with a career high. So, yes, offense has been a big part of it. The bullpen has been mesmerizing, right? The best bullpen in all of Major League Baseball to offset the questionable starting pitching other than Tanner Bybee and Ben Lively. So, Stephen Vogt, I don't know how you're doing it. Smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand. You've got Lucky Charms you're carrying in your back pocket. Whatever it is, keep doing what you're doing, and let's hope that this second half goes as well as the first half.
Well, starting pitching, which is usually a strength of this organization, it's just not. Gavin Williams will make his first start in the majors tomorrow against the White Sox. And, boy, they need him to be kind of what he was last year. That would help.
Gavin Williams, I got a chance to see him last year make his Major League debut. The Kenny and JT show, we were live at Progressive Field doing the pregame show, and it just happened to be on a night where he was making his Major League debut. He can get it up there, right? I think he topped out in his last rehab start at 98.7 miles an hour, so the MPHs, or as the kids call it, the velo these days, right? It's there. Question is, how many pitches can he throw? He'll be on a pitch count for sure. Can he give you 4 innings tomorrow night, Wednesday night, in his debut? 5 innings would be great, but the pitch count is going to be the key there. I think he'll get 2 starts in before the All-Star break and then see how everything feels, get a few days off, and then come back. So hopefully he can give them literally a shot in the arm with that starting rotation. And they've sent Tristan McKenzie down to AAA Columbus. I don't know if he's going to be able to figure things out. He's given up the most home runs, I believe it is, and the most walks in the American League among starting pitchers. And I think he's pitching hurt. He's trying to gut his way through it, figure out a way to pitch with whatever is still ailing him. Maybe we find out they have to shut him down like they did Shane Bieber, or maybe we get lucky and he goes down to AAA Columbus and is able to figure things out. But getting Gavin Williams back is big if he can stay in the rotation. If he can't and he has a setback, then for sure they're going to have to make a trade for a starting pitcher before the July 30th trading deadline.
And, we'll get into that. So this is from ESPN.com. 1 player each MLB team should trade for or trade away at the deadline. For the Guardians, they say the Guardians, Twins, and Diamondbacks, they'll give you an idea, they should trade for Jack Flaherty. Guardians, no first-place team needs a starting pitcher more than Cleveland. Logan Allen, Tristan McKenzie, ERAs over 5. McKenzie just sent down to the minors. Flaherty would become the Guardians' #1 starter. I don't know that he'd be the #1 starter. I think Tanner Bybee's kind of graduating into that role. But Flaherty's a guy that, had arm injuries a couple years ago and has come back. My question is twofold. What's it going to cost, and who else is bidding against him? Because the problem is, Kenny, everybody needs starting pitching. We showed this on our show yesterday, and I was stunned by it. There are 59 pitchers in the American League alone that are on the 60-day injured list. Not the 15-day, the 60-day, like the big one. Like, you're out for months. That's an average of almost 4 per team. That'll give you an idea of how many people need starting pitching, and that's just going to drive the price right through the roof.
Yeah, it is. And I'll be honest with you. I haven't, I like to do deep dives before I say, I want this guy, right? I haven't done a deep dive on Flaherty, but I know they need starting pitching. So if he's the best of the bunch that's available, that won't cost you, your top two prospects in the minors, then I'll put him at the top of my list and start that deep dive. They have to go out, whether it's a number one caliber starter, a number two, a number three, whatever. They need a veteran that can give them innings to lessen the load on that bullpen. And, right now there are two pitchers that I trust, Tanner Bybee and Ben Lively. Raise your hand if you knew Ben Lively was going to be, no, none of us did, right? But they are the two that you can trust right now for the Guardians. That's not enough. Okay, you may win your division, but that's not going to be enough in the playoffs. They've got to go get one, if not two, pitchers. And when I say two, I mean a starter and maybe another reliever to lessen the load as well off of some of those guys in baseball's best bullpen. So yes, starting pitching at the top of my list, maybe another bullpen arm, and then a right-handed bat if I've got my, three choices.
And again, Gavin Williams, that would help. He could count as somebody, but you can't count on him. Matthew Boyd, who they signed, is another guy, has pitched in the big leagues, he's 33. He's coming off Tommy John. If he could end up being a middle back end of the rotation guy. He would count, but you can't count on him. So right. Here's one for you. I've been waiting to ask somebody this for a while. I'm curious. Okay. Curious to your answer to this. You have an important decision that may alter the franchise. Who do you have more confidence in? Kobe Altman of the Cavs, Chris Antonetti of the Guardians, or Andrew Berry of the Browns?
Of those three, and Kobe Altman has done pretty well so far this offseason. I was concerned about the coaching hire. I like Atkinson of the guys that were available. I thought he was at the top of the list, okay? So I like that. Donovan Mitchell, we find that out today. That's good. So Kobe Altman right now is looking great. But the big thing is he going to run it back with everybody? If not, what kind of a trade can he make to better this team? Because as is, I don't think the Cavs can beat the Celtics and win a championship. So that's the Kobe Altman viewpoint. As far as Chris Antonetti, he has limited resources, right? He always has limited resources, but somehow, some way, they find a way, especially when it comes to pitchers, of making the right acquisition and then giving them to Carl Willis, tweaking a few things, and those guys turn out to be front-of-the-line rotation guys or key bullpen guys. Andrew Berry, the Deshaun Watson trade hangs over his head. So he's how about this? Kobe Altman has moved ahead of Andrew Berry for me, but I'm going to put Antonetti at the top of the list based on recent history in situations like this, especially given the limited resources.
Fair enough. I probably have Altman and Berry flipped, and Berry might even be closer to Antonetti because here's my rationale with that. They knew what Baker Mayfield was. Baker Mayfield he's a middle of the road starting quarterback, and they looked at it and said middle of the road isn't going to get us where we're going to go. They swang for the fences. Now it hasn't worked out. But I would rather swing for the fences than sit there and, try to make a guy that's middle of the road better than that.
Here's why before this all started, we had this conversation on WHBC. Same question, right? JT and I. And I had Andrew Berry ahead of Kobe Altman. But, now that with what Kobe's done, right? So far, so good. And I look at, I'm not a fan of Jed Wills. They didn't swing and miss. They should have hit at least a triple. They got a bunt single in Jed Wills, all right? When you look at the quarterback, we're still waiting on Deshaun Watson. What's going to happen there? The wide receivers, Amari Cooper, your best wide receiver, held out of OTAs and mandatory minicamp. Will he hold out of training camp when they go to the Greenbrier? We'll have to wait and see. He is your number one receiver. You can't have that hanging over your head. They overpaid Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion. He hasn't done enough to earn that kind of money. So that's why all of a sudden Barry maybe is dropped on my list, where for you, he's a little bit higher.
Yeah, no, I like the Jerry Jeudy signing. I think he's ahead of the market instead of being behind it. But again, I certainly can understand somebody who views it the way that you're explaining it as well. It's just I think he's been pretty good at being ahead of the market. We'll see. The beautiful thing is time will tell with all of these.
Yes, and here's the thing. I look at the Guardians and the Cavaliers, and I see them almost identical, okay? Right now, the Guardians have to make a move if they're going to have a chance to win playoff series. I think they can win the division. Based on what I've seen so far, they're 6 up on Minnesota, 7 on KC after 82 games, right? I think they have the bullpen and enough offense to win that division. But when it gets to the playoffs, I don't know how far they can go. So if they stand pat, then winning the division is all they're going to do. Cavaliers, same thing. If they stand pat, running it back just with a new coach and keeping the core 4 together, hey, they're going to make the playoffs, and maybe they win a first round, but I don't see them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. Not with the Knicks adding Mikal Bridges. I know they lost Hartenstein, but still they add Mikal Bridges, right? The Pacers were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. People forget that already. Boston won the NBA championship, and the Philadelphia 76ers are adding guys left and right. Andre Drummond, Paul George, whoever it is. So both the Cavaliers and the Guardians need to do something more than what they've done to this point if they're going to have a chance to advance further in the postseason.
Kenny Roda, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Kenny.
Always enjoy it, David. Thanks for having me.
Kenny Roda, make sure you check him out. The Kenny and JT Show, News Talk, 1480 WHBC. Always enjoy talking with Kenny Roda. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.